Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming. Kate, if you want to move to slide 2, thank you so much. So many of you have joined this event through our online community, The Bridge. If you are not familiar with what The Bridge is, because I know we had many different avenues to join us today, the direct Zoom link through The Bridge, and then through our LinkedIn event page. So if you're not familiar with what The Bridge is, it is the Doyle Group's online community for IT professionals, and we've created it to bring together top professionals to ignite connections among those on the same path, where we can create opportunities for success inside the community and members can make an impact in their career. Kate, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. And if this is one of your first events in the Bridge, or if you are a new member to the Bridge, we've set up a welcome session on November 21st. If you want to familiarize yourself with the platform, figure out all of the different tabs that you see there on the left-hand side on that screenshot. We have articles, we have tools in there, some stats, and then we also host several events. So if you want to stay up to date on what events we have coming down the pipeline, joining the Doyle Group's online community, The Bridge, is a great place to start. And we hope you can join us for that Q&A session on the 21st. Go ahead and next one. Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Now I would like to introduce Andrew Doyle, our founder. He'll be moderating today's discussion.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. Thanks for everybody who's attending today. Most importantly, thanks Chris and Sujan for joining us. So we've got some great questions for our panelists today, but just going to give you a brief overview of why the Doyle Group is even doing these webinars. Is that we just realized that over the years of our 15 years in business that we do a lot of work in the data space. We also do a lot of work in the program and project management space. So last year in 2023, we did a few panels where we brought industry experts in a very similar fashion to ask them some questions. Really kind of broaden the community so that everybody can kind of participate. And just a great learning opportunity, right, to kind of share, give back to the community that we get to serve. And then this year we decided to really focus in on the data area. It's just another space that we do a lot of work in data analytics, data governance, data architecture design. And so super excited to have Chris and Sujan here because they definitely know this space well. And we'll be able to jump into some questions for them. In terms of who the Doyle Group is, for anybody who is not familiar, we're an IT consulting and placement firm. I founded the organization it'll actually be 16 years in January, so our birthday's coming up here soon. But really, it's we partner with our customers to help them find high-performing technology teams, and if that's smaller teams or individuals, we'll go ahead and do that. So anybody who's on the call who's interested in knowing what our capabilities are there, or just want to understand market conditions, please reach out to us. And then if there's any candidates on the call who's maybe looking for new opportunities into 2025, just want to explore, again, market conditions, what's kind of happening out there. We've got a host of a team that can help service anybody who has any additional questions there. So let us know on that front. In terms of, Kate, maybe the next slide. In terms of kind of where we focus our services, it's really kind of in that contract to hire, consulting projects. We've done some assessments for some customers. I've done retained executive search, placed a couple of CIOs here in the Denver area. We do work across the country, but definitely have a stronger presence in the Denver area. And then at the end of last year, we were getting so many more requests for like nearshore and offshore services that we built some relationships and had a successful project actually kick off earlier this year that wrapped up about a month ago. But we provided an onshore resource to be the lead to manage as for a cloud migration project, and our nearshore resource was in Mexico. We actually just did a case study review with our customer this week, and they had very positive things to say about the pricing of the structure, as well as the local time zone and the efficiency of it. So the areas that we focus in, I kind of mentioned leadership, but also in the digital solution space, so web, mobile, UI, UX, program and project management, both agile, PMBOK, change management, software development, architecture design, DevOps and test, data analytics, data warehousing, business intelligence, MDM, and obviously that's why we're here today. So we'll kick it off to do introductions for our panelists on our next slide. So again, super psyched to have Sujan and Chris joining us today. Just to give you some background, I'll give you a quick bio on Sujan, but he's a seasoned technology executive with a distinguished 2-decade career spanning both public and private companies. His focus has always been on driving business innovation and crafting capital efficient growth strategies to achieve substantial outcomes. Throughout his professional journey, he has consistently delivered heightened sales performance, significant cost reductions, revenue-generating products and services, and improved customer engagement. His extensive experience includes spearheading large-scale technology initiatives and integrations, always guided by a relentless pursuit of innovation and a willingness to explore new frontiers to meet ambitious objectives. So welcome, Sujan. He currently is the Chief Digital Information Officer at Verdantas. Christopher MacCabe is up next, but Chris is a data-driven leader with 15 years of experience in financial and data management, specializing in driving organizational transformation through data governance, analytics, and IT finance integration. Chris has proven expertise in implementing enterprise data governance frameworks, leading cross-functional teams, and optimizing data management strategies to enhance business performance. Chris is adept at collaborating with executive stakeholders to develop business-centric data solutions, strong leadership in digital transformation, cloud migration, and enterprise reporting. So welcome, Chris, to today's panel. Chris is currently serving as the Director of Data Governance and Analytics for Ball Corporation. Excellent. Well, we will jump into our first set of questions. And it was kind of interesting. I was actually just yesterday meeting with a customer. We're talking about kind of the role of data. And, this gentleman actually was not in technology, he was over operations. And even he himself knows how important data is. They've gone through lots of acquisitions, a lot of technical debt. And so I think this is a great question to kind of serve up. I'll give this one to Chris to start off with. But how do you find the role of data in driving business outcomes today? And what do you see as the most significant challenges organizations face in managing their data effectively?
Andrew, thank you for the kind words and welcome. First, one thing I want to make sure the opinions I express are mine and not that of my company. So just make sure everyone hears that too. I don't think data has really changed a lot. I think people's access and expectations for data. So how do we use it to drive outcomes? It's making informed decisions. How are we optimizing operations? How are we looking at gaining a competitive advantage? I think those are questions that people have been asking, at least for as long as I've been around. But I think the focus now on data is there's a lot more of it, and how are you getting access to it? So I think the expectation for its role in our decision-making has changed. But realistically, I think we're using it the same way. It's just, how are we experiencing it? So to me, the biggest challenge is siloed communication. You can think about that with how people in historic teams tried to collaborate together. I think now with technologies and applications, people see themselves as owners. So one of the biggest challenges is, how are we getting people the right information? How are we getting them to try to answer the right question? And are they using the right data sources? Those, I think, are the biggest issues that I've seen. And then also, one thing that we try and do is, how are we embedding data in that strategic planning process? So we're a manufacturing plant. I've worked in manufacturing for a long time. A lot of us is, what are we selling? How are we making it? And where are we making it? A lot of questions that we've always been doing, but now we want people using the same sources of information to try to make better, more aligned decisions. So I'd say for us, data decisions haven't much changed. It's just, how are they getting to that same data?
Sujan?
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I think the fundamental foundational data is still very, very applicable, no matter where you are in your journey. Again, I think Chris alluded to that with applications and tools. I'll use quite a bit of AI into the mix, because that's top of mind for many companies, and it's definitely something that is very promising. At the same time, we were hitting a lot of this stories on, okay, is it really that promising? Because we hear, if you are following stock market, anything that we hear, it jumps with some AI agent release, and then it goes up, and the next day we hear the chips are not performing or overheating, and then they go down. So it's just what we're seeing is generally the hype. But to add to what Chris said, I mean, having a foundational data, siloed data is still is an issue. I know many companies, many vendors come in and provide different platforms with a fabric kind of a solution. It can bring all this together, but still the fundamentals of, okay, what data makes sense? What data can you use to make the decision? And what data can you actually use for, like, I mean, your core business processes is very critical. So those fundamental approaches have to still be very much intact. You need to go through the process. Now, there is nothing AI can magically do for that, for you in terms of just identify the data. It's still garbage in, garbage out, still applies. 70% of data projects fail because of data quality. Doesn't matter if it is back in the day with OLTP systems to big data to ML and then to AI, the data quality is still very critical. And we'll hit those on data governance and data quality aspects, but and to your question, I mean, that is definitely data is still very critical for you to for business outcomes. AI is going to daylight it in terms of making it easier to access. You can put a particular knowledge source as a data source for a ChatGPT kind of experience. I'm trying to be very generic here. You'll get responses back, and we were talking about hallucinations. That is still very applicable. It's very confident in the way it provides you a response. So validating the data, ensuring it has the proper controls, and then we'll talk about privacy and information protection policies and other stuff. Those are all very key for you to get value out of it. End of the day, I mean, data and AI are going to drive business outcomes going forward.
Well, thanks, Sujan. I think we go to the next question here, Kate. Again, it's the AI question, right? So looking ahead, what trends do you believe will have the biggest impact on how organizations approach data management and strategy in the next 5 years? Sujan, you want to take this one? Yeah, I'll build on what I just said. I mean, that AI strategy is going to have to have in your strategy. I mean, this just is not an option. It's not something that you can say, okay, you're kind of doing it, you have to be doing it. The reason for that is we just saw, I mean, with ChatGPT just made that NLP, natural language processing, much easier for users to consume it. And if you were to ask any programmer, the most popular programming language today is English, not Python, not Java, not C#, all the things that we have seen over years. It's English because you're able to ask a question, prompt, and you're getting back responses in English. So it puts a lot of onus on the technologists. If you are in the technology, you're dealing with the data and how do we bring that data together and then put an AI on top of it. Makes sense. When we go through the use cases of identifying AI scenarios or AI use case, that should be part of your strategy. Come up with something that is a little bit more generic that you can get users embrace AI in their day-to-day job. I mean, like a business, ChatGPT is a good use case if you're in a Microsoft shop. Enable that for your organization. It puts some controls, put some enterprise-grade protection for your data so that you don't have folks putting your pricing strategy kind of documents out there in general ChatGPT. You don't want that. So you want to make sure that you have some protection, but find use cases, identify use cases that there are a lot of different ROI models that you can build from a investment to all the way up to value generation. How do you build those use cases? Have 3 or 4 different use cases for different scenarios. One term that you will hear quite a bit, this actually Salesforce made it popular, agentic AI. That is going to become more popular. You will hear a lot from Microsoft. This week is Microsoft Ignite conference. They're talking a lot about it. Copilot agents. So you identify different agents for different business processes, and they go in. They're not only just building the conversation off of your data, but they're also providing that business process changes with actions. So you will see more of that. Again, we can go on and on in terms of 5-year strategy. Start with fun use cases that get users comfortable with AI from a technology perspective. You will find users that are on a wide range of spectrum, novice to this kind of technologies to really trailblazers that are embracing this every day. So give them a common platform to play with and identify 3 to 5 use cases. Real quick, Sujan, just to kind of talk about the agents, can you just high level quick, give a use case for an agent for anybody who's not familiar with it?
Is it for me or Chris? Sorry.
I actually, either one. I know you were talking about agents, Chris. If you want it, go ahead and take it, or Sujan, you can finish up.
Yeah, we are a professional services organization. Verdantas, we do a lot of projects. So we identified an agent use case for us to help us with our project management, where you need to find skills, you need to find matches for who's a certified geologist in Atlanta area. That's a question that somebody's asking for. Those are the use cases that we brought into the skills finder. So find an ability to find skills within an organization. And then I want to learn more about, it's just not finding skills. Okay, I want to learn more about that person, licensure experience, professional experience, and also what projects have they worked on. And then once we find the projects related to that person, now, okay, what projects do we have that we have done similar to this, and tell me about our utilization rates. And then once you identify that, you can all then say, okay, based on all this information, draft a proposal document for this project. You see how you're building like a context on context on context, and that becomes a strong use case. And that's one of the use cases that we're working on. That is an agent.
Chris, anything else you want to add to this question?
So we haven't used agents a lot. Most of our use cases have been that testing area, seeing where they would fit, what type of training would go into making a useful agent. But I do think to this question, it's user-friendly platforms. I mean, you talked about coding. I'm still a fan of C++, but I know a lot of people don't use that anymore. It's getting rid of that shadow IT. How do you make the business a little bit more savvy and being able to write those questions and getting that response? How do you make things a little bit more self-service? So what Suraj was talking about is that agent. How am I interacting with someone that's turning this around at a faster pace? I think on this question, it's a lot of the expectations. It's real-time data analytics, advances in AI, but really the things that I want people to be focused on in the next 5 years is data ethics and that responsible AI practices. Those are the ones that we talk about, because I think in this conversation, AI is going to happen. It's not an if, it's a when. Our companies are going to get on board with it. And so what we need to start thinking about is, where do you want to use it? What are the types of capabilities you want to enable? What are the things you want to work towards? So I think over the next 5 years, like with most new technologies and ways of working, we'll have some pitfalls. We'll use it in places where it probably doesn't make sense. But I do think it's managing that expectation of getting user-friendly with the business, answering their questions, more real time, and how are we trying to drive AI to provide value?
Awesome. Okay, we can go to the next question. It's funny because I've heard this from a lot of clients that not all business stakeholders or executives really understand the importance of data and how to manage it. So I think it kind of jumps into this question, and we'll throw this one to Sujan. But what shifts in organizational culture or mindset are required to keep up with the growing importance of data as a strategic asset?
Yeah, I can take a first stab at it. Again, I think Chris, you said, we have seen technologies come up. This is not our first rodeo here. We've seen this with big data back in the day. The hype that creates, it all comes down to people. It all comes down to the organization culture. That doesn't change. That doesn't change with something like even AI, where it makes it look like a commercial grade, something that you can use. The value of people-centric kind of approach to your strategy still is very critical. And then with technology, obviously, you can enable that with proper mix of tools in your toolbox. You can make that more efficient. You can build those capabilities, but it comes down to the people culture. So finding those trailblazers or champions within the organization is very critical, so that you can start to build on their kind of risk taking, and then saying, okay, I want to try something new. You need always from the business. Again, I'm speaking from a technology perspective. We can speak about technology, end of the day, it doesn't matter to the business if you're not speaking their language, if you're not speaking in their financial terms or the business terms. So you definitely need champions within the business for you to start building these capabilities. And we have seen in the last 4 years since the pandemic, when technology became like a kind of came to the forefront, we got a seat at the table. Now we have an opportunity with AI to take it to the next level, but it all comes down to culture, and as part of culture, relationships. Those do matter. Those don't go away.
Chris.
So actually, I want to address one of the questions that kind of came up in here because I think it goes into my response. Data is not really a function of IT anymore. So I think the question that came up is, won't agents enable more shadow IT? I think part of that culture changes our view of what shadow IT needs to change. How are we providing more frameworks? How are we providing that type of self-service enablement? Because that's the expectation. And in all honesty, that's where a lot of our culture is changing towards. People are coming out of school, having experience with these tools and using them. I think trying to show that as a IT only or an IT focused organization is going to slow us down. It's about how are we identifying the business priorities? How are we trying to align what we are doing to best partner and fulfill that demand? So I do think that in this one, it's data isn't an IT object anymore. It's owned cross-functionally. We have to be able to enable that. It's really trying to find that translator of the functional person that speaks tech or the tech person that speaks functional and being able to really empower and enable them. So to us, finding those types of champions, driving that in our culture and saying, like everything else, I mean, we said it earlier, garbage in, garbage out. You guys need to understand that. You need to control the quality of the data going into these applications, these models, these analytics. So for us, it's really driving that ownership within the business.
I love it. Well, this next question is going to be right down Chris's alley since he lives and breathes this every day. But what are the key elements of a strong data governance framework? And how can organizations implement governance without slowing down their ability to innovate? Because that's always the challenge, right? We need this delivered. Let's go. But like you said, you got to have good data in. So
this one is a good one. I think a lot of it is how do you do data governance with business prioritization? It's not let's sit down, let's define a customer and then figure out the applications or how to best model. That one is what are we trying to achieve? How do we start applying a data governance framework to that? Because that's where it's seen as an enabler and not in this point, a toll gate. Things that I have seen in many companies and many people that I've talked to is we're trying to set up a data governance organization, but it's more of a check the box routine versus a what are we trying to get out of this? How are we using customer? Where do we want to get that? The tagline I like to try and use with people is data governance is trying to define what we're talking about and where do we want to get it from. And once people kind of understand that concept of it, it's a lot easier for them to work with you and start talking about, oh, customer segmentation. Here's how we want to use it. This is where we want to pull it from. How do we add or change those requirements? What are we using it to enable? These things aren't set in stone. And to me, especially with how all these systems are starting to integrate and the expectation with how people are trying to use the same data sets, that's where I think if you do data governance in a partnership way, what are the business priorities for this year? What are we working on in this quarter? How are we trying to provide governance for those areas? It very much becomes using it to help enable a project versus we need to set all this up before we can do projects. So that's what I've seen has helped us and many other companies that I've talked to.
Love it. Sujan?
Yeah, again, I think the foundational aspect of that data governance, back to the agent question on shadow IT, it all comes down to having that foundational governance framework. I mean, that doesn't change. Again, I think, Chris, you were saying that cross-functional partnership or engagement is very critical. It's just not IT coming in and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. I think IT, it's bytes and it doesn't matter. I mean, to us, it's data, but more value is coming from the functional teams, the business teams. So they got to play a bigger role in this. It's not an IT function or IT job to build a data governance framework. It has to be in partnership with the business. So build that framework. Again, some of the foundational aspects you got to have, those are non-negotiable in terms of having security, privacy. Those are the things that folks expect. Again, this is something that is part of your framework. And then if you add in AI governance framework on top of it, that's the next layer that we need. What are the use cases? Where do we enable those agents? Kind of sticking to that example, all need to go back to that, having a framework and methodology to approach this. Otherwise, it will be just another wild west with everybody trying to get their own Copilot stuff or agent stuff built or their own AI solutions built, and we'll run into the same situation that we had a few years ago with reporting, right? I mean, do we have a centralized reporting team or do we decentralized? Similar challenges, different technology.
Gotcha. Well, and we'll move to the next question, but we'll maybe throw this back to Chris again in terms of the evolution of data, or data governance. But how do you see the role of data governance evolving as organizations become more reliant on real-time data and interconnected systems?
Is embedding it as part of the process. So rather than it being a afterthought at the end of a line, or as we've tried to work through a solution and then come back and do it, it's how are we going through it, looking at what type of information are we using, what's the life cycle of it, and asking those questions as you try to work through it, because that data, it's not going to get any slower. So it's really moving towards that as part of the development process, not an at the end, after the fact part of the process. Plug for data governance.
Sujan, anything else you want to add to that?
I think I completely agree with Chris on that. I mean, it has to be part of your process. When data is tied to the process, and the process will drive the kind of the structure around that, whether that's real-time data or near real-time. And especially now, I mean, with the IT and the OT convergence, and we have seen that over years, it just becomes new normal. How do you bring your business data with your operational data? Again, having that strong governance on strong framework and put some guardrails around it so that it's not something that comes into your ecosystem and then folks are making business decisions on it. You want to avoid that.
One thing I do like about this question, though, is calling out real-time data and interconnected systems. I see a heavy indexing on getting real-time information, streaming information. We need it right now. Really, the question that they're asking for is more on interconnected systems, pulling it from the right place. So to me, part of data governance is what system are you pulling it from? So that's where we try and index it on part of the process. Like, hey, before we talk about the availability or the velocity of the data, let's talk about the right source of the data. So that's where, again, making it part of the process, you're minimizing that type of rework.
Love it. No, great additional insight. Again, we'll stay on the topic of AI. I think it's on everybody's top of mind, but maybe you guys can talk specifically about each of your individual organizations leveraging AI. Are there any specific initiatives you recently implemented? I know Sujan said he was actually just working on something before our call. And then additionally, what lessons have you learned? What advice would you give or offer to leaders aiming to integrate AI into their strategies? So it's kind of a two-part question. We'll give this one to Sujan to kick it off.
Yeah, so this was something, I mean, I think AI, the Copilot term that Microsoft coined probably like 18 months ago, has definitely caught fire within our industry. Not just tech, I mean, it's across other industries. From our perspective, when we were looking at what are the strong uses, where can we see value for the investment or return on investment? We looked at various different use cases, and I started looking at our core business because that's where I saw the maximum impact. What's our core business model? We are a professional services organization, and we work on projects, 7,000 projects at any time. So if we were to have return on investment and the value that can have a true impact on the business, that use case became stronger. The more we can do it, we have a lot of project data, we have a lot of project related data that is kind of in all over our network share and SharePoint and all the different locations. So we were able to build a use case and an initiative around it to build a project Copilot. Internally, we are calling that project resources and pursuits. So that goes back, goes after this. And then as part of that, we had to bring in the data into a common data set or common data platform. So we bring that into a Microsoft Fabric and going through those layers of, okay, taking advantage of where we can, like a data lake where data can come in the raw format and building out the bronze, silver, gold layers. We focus a lot on the data, again, to the data governance and the data quality that we talked about. That helped us to build any AI on top of this data, because we know this is curated, this is governed, this is taxonomy, tagging and others are built into it. Now if we put an AI on it, it just put it on steroids, and it just highlighted the value that we can see from this data from multiple different data sources. So that's our big initiative. We are in our MVP phase. We'll be going live with the phase 1 by the end of the year, and we have a quarterly release plan going into next year. As we were doing that, I mean, like folks were getting comfortable with it, with AI, and then just having a conversational experience, and they came back with a lot of other use cases. Can you do this for when I'm working on a sales pursuit? Tell me more about this client and what does this client do? I mean, tell me some historical information. So we are getting those use cases submitted to us, and we are going through a prioritization framework to identify the right use cases. And then if we expand that to our operational side of our business model, we do a lot of work in like design generation, site mapping, field mapping, and we are getting use cases through those. So they all are going through a prioritization framework. We are going through that as we speak, and then coming up with 3 or 4 additional use cases as we go into next year.
Oh, great insight. Chris, what do you want to add to this?
So I'm going to be a little dodgy on this question. I don't want to talk really about our AI strategy. I personally believe that as companies work through this, it'll become more of a strategic competitive advantage for companies that can and cannot do it well. So kind of what we're looking on. I do want to go into kind of what was just talked about, sourcing the right level of data. So we're on a data lake journey, the same medallion architecture with ingest, curation, publication, what type of showroom tools are there. To me, I think AI fits very well in that showroom aspect. Where are you allowing to access your curated data? Where are you allowing it to look at uncurated data? So I'd say anything that people can do to better define and standardize how they're getting that information pulled together for your AI capability to use. Those are the things that I see as really good, strong lessons learned. Getting faster ingestion into your bronze layer. How do you try to scale quickly in your silver layer? And then ultimately, like, what can you get to that publication? So sorry for the non-answer, but
No.
I do think that is something that, especially as we don't know right now and we're trying to figure it out, that AI and that type of data ethics. What do you want to share and what could turn into a competitive capability or not?
Do you guys think that just the advent of AI, that it's really allowing the business to communicate, I don't know, more effectively with IT, because now you guys are speaking more of the same language versus in the past it's always been, well, it kind of looks like this, where now it seems like, you know, kind of more that self-service model, and use cases are getting better. They're getting to start to think and understand how to process data differently. Is that do you see that things are kind of moving forward leaps and bounds, that the business is understanding data a lot easier these days?
I would say yes and no to a certain extent. The reason for that is because it's kind of a consumer grade, and I mean, AI is a commodity. It's not something that you need to invest a lot to get to see the value of the capabilities. It's available out there, so it's a new normal, right? I mean, every organization will have access to it, small, medium, large, and they all get similar tools. Maybe once you dig into that a little bit deeper and try to identify more specific use cases, it gets expensive, but it is available. It's a commodity. So the leveling field is now pretty much the same for everybody. So the business is coming in with an expectation sometimes like, oh, I think AI can do this. But it goes back to what Chris, you were talking about, that governance, the framework, the garbage in, garbage out. I'm trying to explain that it's not a magical tool. It's just not going to figure out things. And more important, it is it gives you a response back in a much more hallucinated, confident manner that you may not even see it unless you go into the data source and validate that. So those fundamentals are still important, but the expectations are high. Hey, I can use this today, and then I pointed this to my SharePoint site, and I'm getting this responses back. Why cannot I use it? No, it cannot, because that's very specific SharePoint site that maybe have good data management, content management, but you cannot just expand that. Same thing with data tables. You have to have that semantic layer. You need to make sure that those relationships are built for that to be consumed. So trying to balance that is where I think Andrew is going to be I wouldn't say challenge, a continuous education.
I do think that it's leading to more conversations. I mean, it's such a big thing in the media. You can't look at a news feed or look at some publication or listen to radio at night and not hear about it. So yes, I do. I think it's increasing the conversation. I'm not sure it's leading to more effective communication right now, but it's like any other thing. 5 years ago, whenever you bought a new application, it came with a data warehouse. Sure, you buy an HR system, feed your P&L in here, and I'll give you a cost per head. Now, anything you buy comes with its own Copilot or Gemini or ChatGPT AI. I mean, it's there. So I think it's leading to more conversations. I don't know right now if I can answer the value of those conversations.
Yeah, I love it. And that's why it's fun to have you guys on this call. So we'll kick this one over to Sujan, but as leaders in your respective fields, how do you approach building and developing teams that can effectively manage, analyze, and leverage data for your organization's success?
You got to have those strong analytical skills. That's your foundation. Somebody who can look at data and then have that analytical mindset to go in. That would be fundamental for that team. Communications is something more important because you need to have those, especially for technologists. I mean, if you're a developer and if you're not comfortable having that conversation with the business and learn the business and speak their language, it's going to be very difficult for you to build something on data and deliver value to the business. You got to learn the business, got to speak that language. And catching up with technology. I mean, I think especially with AI, there's so many things that are rapidly changing. It doesn't matter if you're in like a Microsoft shop or Google or any other vendor that you're working with. I mean, it's constantly changing. So trying to catch up with that or keep up with the latest changes and trying to bring that in. And sometimes business may see something at a demo or on a podcast, like Chris said, and that's something that they may say, okay, I heard this and I thought I can just connect to this and then it'll give me this. So trying to, how do you manage, those are some difficult conversations. You don't want to play it down, but at the same time, you want to make sure you give them a reason or understanding of their problem and then provide them a solution that is not instantaneous. It's going to take some time to get there. So those would be 3 skills: analytical, communication, and technical AI skills.
Love it. Chris?
I want people who listen and I want people who ask questions. So it's what we just talked about. It's how do you understand what's being asked? How do you slow down and try and understand what are you really trying to do? And then asking questions, why, and trying to get down to that. I mean, it is really hard to find or interview for that type of talent. Andrew, I think that's why a lot of people give you calls, because you get a chance to meet with people for a little bit longer than a 30 minute or 1 hour interview.
Yeah.
But I think it's a mix of technical and business skills, but it's listening to what's being asked. It's asking questions and trying to probe and be inquisitive and looking for stuff on their own. I think that is how we need to build successful organizations.
Love it. We'll move to the next question, Kate, and we'll go this back to Chris. But lessons learned from your experience as a leader. What advice would you give to other leaders on fostering collaboration between technical and non-technical teams when it comes to data projects?
I've had a number of peer conversations on this one on how do we effectively use agile methodology. In all honesty, I think it gets a bad rap sometimes. People think it's IT for IT speak and what's the value of doing it. So where I find is, who's your translator? What are you really trying to do? How do you get someone who understands how you're trying to deliver something and then saying it in a way that a business person resonates with? It's all about your terminology. What are you trying to do? So for me, it's finding that right translator person, whether it's a technical person that I've upskilled to the business, it's a business person that we've been able to bring into more of an IT area. But for me, if you find those people, they're your collaborators. They're your links to getting that stakeholder engagement. And then it's, you know what, put our egos aside and our terms aside. How do you use that in a way that your stakeholder can resonate with? And then effectively drive that communication. To me, that's what I would say leaders really need to focus on.
Sujan?
Yeah, I think just understanding the business, speaking the business language, going down to the process level, even before you talk about technology. I know that's sometimes hard for a technology leader, and traditionally technology has been like more of an order taker, and then now you're kind of changing that conversation as a co-creator of solutions. So when you are in that position, try to learn more about the business, understand the pain points, ask the right questions. But data projects are complicated. I mean, even though when we live and breathe data, just trying to build data from a foundation level and silo data, integrating data, the schemas are different across systems. How do you bring those different data sets together? It's a challenge, and that takes time. The problem is, or the challenge we have is business cannot wait. They need things at business speed. So how do you balance that? How do you deliver something that they can start playing with, but at the same time say, this is a good enough solution, but not a perfect solution? So that balancing act is something that is, I mean, it's unique to each business case or initiative that you're working on. But building that trust will get you a long ways to build those projects successfully and deliver them.
Love it. Kate, can we go to the next slide? Chris, we'll give this one to you. Can you share an example of a successful data project? What lessons were learned? What made it successful? And if you've been a project that was not successful, what would you do differently? You can, chop those up.
So full transparency, I did throw this one into ChatGPT just to kind of get some starter ideas on how I wanted to respond.
Yeah.
And it absolutely hallucinated a fictitious one that said we reduced downtime 20%. I thought that was fantastic. I mean, I'd love to stand on that one. One for us was logistics. It was a way that we were trying to tie how do we look at an individual pallet and what truck is it on? Is it going to a customer? Is it going to a warehouse?
And real quick, Chris, and maybe I'll do this for Sujan as well. In one sentence, can you give the background in terms of what Ball does, just so people understand the context?
Oh, we are the leader in aluminum package conversion. So we're an aluminum packaging company. We recently divested of aerospace. They were our longest running business segment up until towards the beginning part of the year. But now the place where most people will know us, we have aluminum cups that I think people have gotten at King Soopers or on Amazon. If you look at any probably beverage container by the UPC code, you might see our little logo Ball. Or if you talk to some of your relatives who do canning, we don't do the mason jars anymore, but that's probably where you've most likely seen our logo or on the former Pepsi Center downtown.
Sorry to redirect you. I just thought it'd be good context for your answer.
No problem. Do you want Sujan to give his 1 cent, or do you want me to finish?
I'll let you finish out because you were talking about
Okay.
how you guys are using it, and I'll give it to him.
So for us, logistics is really important because we have to move product. For us, what made that really successful, we didn't wait till we had a solution. We really worked 1 week sprints with our business stakeholder. We pulled real-time data. We asked them, what question are we trying to look at? And we sat down with them at their desk, modeled through it. And then once we got those requirements, that's when we went to go productionalize it. For us, that was what made it successful. It's the agile framework. We didn't have a Scrum Master for that one, but it was the business-led prioritization, getting that product owner in there, looking at what you're doing, full transparency. And then that way they weren't waiting 6 months and a number of thousands of dollars later for something that didn't answer the question that they were asking. To me, that is where we've had the most success, is when we've had that product owner, real stakeholder, a part of the solutioning.
Love it. And actually we'll go to Sujan and we'll come back on any project that wasn't successful. But Sujan, maybe a quick overview of the company and a successful project example.
Yeah, Verdantas, we are a leading engineering and environmental services organization. So we provide that end-to-end solutions, services to different sectors, from industrial, oil and gas, energy transition, water, all these different sectors use our practice areas, and we go in and we provide those solutions. We are like a top 100 ENR ranking, 2,000 plus organization today, growing very, very fast, very aggressively. As part of our growth strategy is acquisitions. So we acquired like 10 acquisitions in this year. So we continue to build organically and inorganically. From a successful data project, every data project that was successful that I was part of was business-driven data project. It has to have a business ownership. It has to have a business stakeholder that is going to be reporting out on the success of the project, or even the delivery of the project. That makes tons of difference because they know the data, they know the business, they know the processes, and technology is just an enabler. So this is where I've seen projects, to your other question, where if it is purely IT-led, technology-led, the success of that is limited because it's only so much we know from a value of data. So I would always pivot it back when something comes in as a project request. Who's the sponsor? What's the driver behind it? What's the return on investment? You go whole 9 yards with them, with the business, and then they are engaged and they are checking on it or providing feedback. It doesn't matter what methodology you use, Agile, Scrum, and all those, they got to be engaged. Then you'll see success of the project.
And Sujan, I think that's a great call out. When it's technology led, you haven't defined your process, you haven't defined your other stuff, you're just looking at putting a system in. Those are the ones, Andrew, I think are the most ripe for failure. Because you also don't know what need you're fulfilling. Clearly, I've never done that here at Ball. Everything we've done is perfect. But I would absolutely echo, if you don't know your process and you're just trying to put in a technology and it's really just IT focus, you're not going to have a very successful implementation.
Well, and it kind of leads to that second part of this question, and I think you guys kind of answered it, but anything else you guys want to add on lessons learned or what you do differently on an unsuccessful project? And I know you guys have never had one. It might be hard to kind of come up with, but if you do.
I mean, off the top of my head, make sure you have a defined process and you also have really well-defined success criteria.
And define the roles and responsibilities too. Sometimes that gets lost in translation, or people expect, okay, I mean, there's a data owner. Data owner is responsible for this. There's a process owner, and they have those responsibilities, so that they know their role in the project, and then they're driving it. I mean, you don't trying to define a customer. I mean, you'll get 10 different definitions. So, I mean, how do you define that and then get consensus? That's not a technology job. That's not a project manager job. That's a business job. They need to define that. So once you get that definition, and everything else will come together in terms of what data elements define that operational definition of that customer.
Gotcha. Well, it's funny. I remember this was probably 15 years ago. I had a customer who said, And I'm trying to wrap my head around this whole agile practice. He's like, at the end of the day, I want to know whose throat do I choke if we don't have success? I said, well, the problem is with the agile process, right? Is it's that you win as a team and you lose as a team, and that's hopefully the values you get buy-in from everyone. So I just thought that was kind of a funny antidote there. Moving to question 10, we'll throw this one to Sujan. But in your experience, what are the most effective strategies for ensuring data accuracy, reliability, and consistency, particularly in large-scale or fast-paced environments? This is our last question. We'll open up for Q&A after these guys get through these.
Yeah, I would say on the data foundation, there's some things, especially on data projects, the difference between data and software projects. Data projects need a foundation. They need to have a strong platform to build on. So there's some things that you have a little bit say on how you want to structure that at a platform level and have proper checks and balances or controls in place. And then you build your analytics layer on top of it, and semantic layer, data layer, analytics, and all that. That's where a lot of business engagement comes in. So you got to have those checks and balances, like for data integration. I mean, you can make sure that your data from system A to system B integrates, and you have some system validation of, okay, I'm pulling 10,000 rows, I'm simplifying it. 10,000 rows from system A, did I get 10,000 rows? Those are things that you got to have as part of your platform. And when you start layering the business rules and the logic and the AI or the analytics layer on top of it, that's all business driven, but there are some things that are technology driven that you can focus on to build a straight foundation, framework, security, privacy, and all that baked into the solution, baked into the platform. Once you have that, and then you work with the business to help define the business rules, the processes stuff, and then analytics. Okay, what metrics, KPIs do you need that need to come out of this? But this is where you can start small and then kind of crawl, walk, run. Right? Okay, let's take one particular data set and then build some metrics, KPIs, definitions, deliver it, see the value of it. But again, you need to understand in the data world, data attracts data. There's no, if you have data sitting somewhere, it has to have some kind of relationship. So business will come to you and say, okay, well, how about this? So you be prepared for that, which means you need to have an open architecture. It cannot be a closed architecture. You should have ability to integrate on a REST API or API calls or whatever you need to do, direct integration. Be prepared for that with an open architecture. Otherwise, you'll be limited. Going back to the success of data project, data cannot just reside in 10 tables in a database. You won't get much value from it.
Great overview. Chris?
I love this guy's touch screen. I'm really jealous of it on the screen. But really, it's a good illustration. The effective strategy, data quality is everyone's responsibility. It's not, this report looks bad, send it over to IT to debug it. It's, what was the process that generated the data? Who are the people using it? Who are the stewards who are trying to maintain it? So for us, it's that organizational change management, culture driven. So for us, the most effective strategy is, this is now a shared environment. It's not just one team versus the other. It's this quality and actually is everyone's responsibility. So for us, standardized data definitions, leveraging automations on, I think what we were calling, how are we using APIs or other mechanisms to move the data. But it's also going back to, how are we really getting people to understand their roles and what they need to use going forward.
I love it. Well, thank you guys so much for the overview of the questions I had for you. But I know there are some audience members that might have some questions. Ashley, is there a number of them in queue or?
So there was one in the chat, but Chris actually already addressed it. So anyone who has questions, you can either submit your question into the chat. I'm happy to read it. Or if you'd like to come off mute or utilize the raise the hand feature on Zoom, please feel free. This is your time to take advantage of asking questions.
Hey, I have a question. I'm the one who actually posted in the chat. So I have another one about how you would set up the data analytics, and now you almost want to say AI teams, because we traditionally, back like 15, 20 years ago, you would have data in a very structure, right? Like reporting to IT basically, and you had analytics who lived in business, sometimes lived in tech as well. I almost feel like, if you don't want to keep separating them, right? But now you also have AI, which is more like an IT discipline right now. I know that it helps across the entire organization, but AI really is more of a, something that IT teams can help implement. So now that you have kind of these three teams, not just two teams like before, what do you think is the right approach from the organizational standpoint? Hopefully my question makes sense. And thank you for all the insight.
I will use my first job. So I started off at KPMG, so an accountant. It depends. I hate that answer, but realistically, like it depends on the organization that you're in. I've talked to ones where it's a COE. I've talked to ones where, to your point, they have embedded analytic teams underneath each functions. It's what works for them. The ones that I have seen and that I talk to in our peer discussions that I think work the best, it's the fusion teams, the ones that, depending on what they're building, here's your product owner, here's where you're bringing in your data engineer, your data governance lead, your analytics, and your business person, and they're working through what those solutions are. And it can depend on where they're doing it, but I agree with you. AI, the way I try to explain it to a lot of people, the larger ones are just a really eager assistant. They want to do really well and they want to do something. So how do you point them to the right stuff? So it's that fusion team. But like I said, it will depend on the company that you're at and what latitude they do. I just personally believe that you have to have all of those people in a backlog review, kind of that ceremony read out where they're going through that type of deployment. That's where I think you're going to see the most effective deliveries.
Yeah, the
I hope
way
that
I have
answers what
current
your
structure,
question is.
it does. I mean, Chris, you're spot on in terms of it depends. Each organization is different. I think we saw this over last 15, 20 years, centralized data team to decentralized data team with analytics embedded into the business. It depends. It truly depends on your organization structure and where they are in their data maturity cycle. I mean, in terms of, do they have a strong platform? Do they have the analytical capabilities? The way I have my current team structured is I have an infrastructure, cloud operations. Again, everything we build is on the cloud. I have a data engineering team primarily responsible for bringing the data in and making that all the way up to the large language model to be processed. And then I have a data science team that is working on indexing the content, building the semantic search, and building that output that integrates back into Microsoft Teams. So that's the way we have set up today for our current situation. In my prior roles, we have set it like a hybrid model or a fusion model, where it is a lot more decentralized. But at some point, I think as we mature in our current rollout of data and AI capabilities, we'll probably give some of those capabilities back to the business so that they can build their own Copilot agents, as an example.
I'm
Sorry for the non-answer.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Anyone else? While we're waiting, if anybody has any thoughts, I guess a question for Chris and Sujan in terms of just when you are on your data journey and you are building out your teams, and it's, again, I know it's sales, let's grow the business and then we'll worry about the data later, right? But I guess just as people look at building out their data teams, again, and it depends on the industry, it depends on what you're trying to do, but what are the roles and skill sets do you guys see most important to, like, you must have this person who's going to be overseeing data, and then how do you build off from that? And is there any, again, I know that there's a lot of twists and turns that go along this, but are there any just key things that you think is important for people as they are looking to build their teams?
I would say, start with you obviously need like really technical architecture skills, like a data architect, data modeler. Those skills are still very valuable. Somebody who can make sense out of data, the relationships, and build the right foundation. You need that. If you were to start a team, start with somebody from the business. You will find really good power users of Excel. I mean, what they can do with Excel, I don't think even Microsoft would have imagined what they have done. So they're really good power users that can play with data, manipulate their data in terms of building different rules and getting the value out of it. That is something that is going to be critical skill set that you want to have on your team, or even have some kind of a dotted line, so to bring that mindset into your organization. So when you combine that with your technical skills, I think you can start to unravel a lot of opportunities.
How about anything else to add, Chris?
Yeah, it's a great question. I agree. I mean, your data foundation, do you want to use a physical container model or a logical model to separate your different layers? How are you trying to identify what do you want to maintain in your fact image? To me, the technical people will always really shine in that part. I think the rest of it is, how are you getting the right people who are asking the right questions and are willing to learn? Because technology is changing, right? So for us, when I hire right now, we will probably have to reskill or upskill in the next 3 to 5 years because something new just came out, or some of the different advancements that we're looking at. We want to move away from just chat bots on something, and we want to start incorporating more of these digital agents. How do we train them up? So to me, it's really hard to over-index on one. It's people are willing to learn, people are willing to try and fail at stuff and get up and move forward. But then again, back to the data foundation stuff, like you can't shy away from, do you want to set up a container? Here's how you provision that. How do you get into the foundational model on that? So you will need that very hardcore IT mindset for that part. But the rest of it, you just need someone who's willing to learn.
Well, was there anything else that came through, Ashley?
There is not, except people who are very, very appreciative of you all providing your insights. So thank you so much again for joining us.
Thank you for hosting.
All right.
I'll give you guys one last one, and we'll let you go. We can give some time back to everyone. But this kind of goes along with some of the stuff that Chris was just talking about. But what advancements in data tools or technologies do you think are currently underutilized by organizations, and what potential do these hold for improving data operations? Are there any specific tools that are being underutilized today that you guys can think of, or
ChatGPT.
it's being underutilized?
Yeah, I mean, in the nicest way. I don't think people understand. This is a very generic response. So please, this is not everyone. Prompt engineering. How do you write a good prompt? I think people are learning that. I think as you go in, understanding it's not just, you don't have to do just one question. You can ask and iterate on top of it. Like, how do you start building that? I would say I think that is actually still very underutilized, and it's one of the reasons why you get to hallucinations, because all it is a probabilistic sphere, and you're trying to guide it to where in the sphere you want to get to. So it's, how do you think of it as a conversation versus I have to ask one question to get there? So to me, I do think that a lot of people are underutilizing that because people aren't well informed or have learned how to do the right type of prompt engineering.
I agree with that. That's a good one.
Is there actually just are you guys doing anything internally at your organizations to help people understand how to be better prompt engineers?
We're trying to. That's an active conversation of there are classes out there now. There's actually a master's class, Andrew, we joked about before we got on about AI. There's one of the sessions in there. It's actually pretty humorous where they talk about, well, if you lightly threaten your chat GPT agent, it might give you a better response. Like, I'm going to get fired if I don't do this. Like, it's funny, but like they are starting some of those learnings. And so what we've talked about is, hey, what's available on LinkedIn? What are things that we want to partner with, like the Leeds School of Business, and potentially develop curriculum? Like it definitely is a hot topic, because whether it's an internal model that we do or an external model that we'll look at it, these are things that I think every company is having to look at.
Mhm.
Not saying that we use them or we don't, but I think a lot of companies are going to be asking those types of questions in the very, very near future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would add one last thing. We heard this, and this is still kind of circling around. Oh, is AI going to replace jobs, or is AI going to replace like by 2040 or whatever? We heard this. I think the reality is AI is never going to replace the jobs, but companies that use AI are going to replace the people and companies that do not use AI. So that is where I think the underutilization comes in. You got to embrace it. It's powerful. There's so much opportunity out there, but the foundational, fundamental things is where you can make the difference.
Well, and just to ask you guys, because the way I try to explain it to especially my kids, if you have a job that's task-based, you might be looking for a new job, right? But if you actually are going to be actually using, like you said, being able to be a strong prompt engineer, if you're actually guiding the conversation, you need data to make decisions. That's where companies really need those types of employees, right? Is people that are thoughtful and intentional. And
So Brian Gabbard, my boss, he had a really good way of articulating this, and I'll relate it to my first week at KPMG. I had to go rip paper clips and staples out of binders, photocopy them so that we could send them over. That was a year of a first year audit person, photocopy, foot. We still have a lot of first year, so the job will evolve and you'll do it. It's just, what's it going to involve to? So I agree, it doesn't replace jobs. It'll change what your job is and what that degree in understanding is. And it will be for all levels of the organization, not just entry level people.
I love it. Well, you guys did awesome today. Again, thanks so much for your time. We do have a little swag bag that we'll send you as a thank you from the Doyle Group, so we appreciate that. And everybody else, thanks again for joining today. Again, if you guys want to share this, found it valuable, there'll be a recording afterwards. I think Ashley will probably get up either later this week or early next. Any updates on that front, Ashley?
Yeah, I should have it within the next day or two. And if you don't already follow us on YouTube, you can view all of our previous events and this one, all of the recordings, right on our YouTube channel. So we have it right there. It's at the Doyle Group 4775. And if you don't follow us on LinkedIn, another plug for following us on LinkedIn, because that's just another avenue of where we share our upcoming events as well.
And as Ashley pointed out too, the bridge that we kind of developed, as well as just everybody that works at the Doyle Group, right, is that we are a connector of people. So that's what hopefully was valuable about this, is just making our little IT community even that much smaller. And again, great overview from Sujan and Chris. We appreciate your time, but definitely let's get connected and see how we can help each other out going forward. Thanks again, you guys.
That's good. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.